what I'd like to do is do a complete demonstration for you, and then I'm going to break it down piece by piece. So remember, it's a 3-step program. It takes crown molding and makes it as easy as 1, 2, 3. Step number 1, spring angle. You have to determine what spring angle your crown molding is. Now, most people don't know this, but crown molding comes in 3 different spring angles, a 38 degrees, 45 degrees, and 52. Now, the reason the industry did this is for ceiling heights. So you'll notice, if I lift this up higher, what's going to happen is because the 52 rotates over farther, it makes the eye address the face of the molding correctly in a taller application. On the other hand, on a lower ceiling, the 38 sits up taller once again, so your eye will address the face of the molding correctly, and the 45 gives you the third option. So remember, if you're going to take the time, spend the money and effort to do a crown molding job, take the time to choose the right spring angle crown molding, and when you're finished, your job's going to look better than it would have otherwise. Now, there is a trick to determining your spring angle, and I'm going to show you that trick right now. What you want to do is take a scrap piece of wood that you're going to throw away, and you want to cut it at 45 degrees. Now, you can take a piece of crown molding and test a spring angle with this 45-degree block by remembering a couple of things. First, whichever side of the crown molding has the most detail on it, that's always the bottom. And the cut on the back side of the bottom always determines the spring angle. So take the cut on the back side of the bottom, put it up against any flat surface, and drop your 45-degree block behind there. Now, only one of 3 things are going to happen. If you take a 45-degree block and drop it behind a 38-degree molding, that block's not going to fit all the way down in there. That tells you it's less than 45, which means it's a 38-degree molding. On the other hand, you take a 45-degree block and drop it behind a 52, it's going to wobble around. That tells you it's greater than 45, so it's a 52. If you drop your block in there and it fits just right, that tells you it's a 45-degree spring angle. Now, once you determine the spring angle of your crown molding, all you have to do is put the corresponding jig. That's the 45, that's the 52, and that's the 38. You'll notice that the jig does the adjustment for you. So test your spring angle and put the corresponding jig on the left-hand side of your saw. Step number 2. You guys know that most corners in most houses are not square. So what we want to do is we want to take the angle finder that comes in the kit. Measure your inside corner or your outside corner, your uphill or downhill vault. Now, the easiest way to explain step number 2 is to tell you that the overall corner divided in half is your left-hand miter setting. So if your corner on an inside corner turns out to be 88 degrees, set your saw to 44. Now, if you're going up a stairway at 30 degrees, you divide 30 in half and set your left-hand miter to 15. Step number 3, determine which cut you want to make. Find that picture on the back of your jig and set it up like the picture shows. So what we want to do here is we're going to make an inside 90-degree corner. And what we'll do is we're going to start with the inside right. Now, this is a 45-degree spring angle, so I'm using the 45-degree jig. That's step number 1. Number 2, I'm doing a 90-degree corner. If I divide 90 in half, my saw setting is 45 degrees. And number 3, find the picture that says inside right. Now, to make it simple, I took a set of the pictures on the back and blew them up so you can read them a lot easier. Inside right is in the bottom left-hand corner. Now, the first thing I want you to notice is on the left-hand side of that picture, there's a gray L that says saw fence, and that's this gray L right here. So in the picture, it's simple to see that the tall side of the jig is sitting against the saw fence. The next thing is the molding sitting on top of the jig. You'll notice that it sits on top of the jig with the face up and the detailed side of the molding uphill. That's how easy this setup is. Those are your 3 steps. Once you set it up like the picture cuts, remember you're going to get the correct cut if you follow the pictures. So you don't have all the waste and the thinking upside down and backwards that you used to have. Now, once you get it set up correctly, find your mark and make the cut. So there's my inside right. Now, we all know that the next thing you're going to have to do is make the inside left or the opposite cut, right? Now, in the past, and you guys all know, everybody here has to move their saw from the left to the right, move to the other side of the saw to make the opposite cut. Well, here's what most people don't think of, because we had no option in the past. 100% of the air in every corner happens between here and there. It all happens in the movement to the other side. So when I figured that out, I kind of got an epiphany. I said, well, if all the air happens when I move to the other side, then I can eliminate 100% of the air by not moving the saw to the other side. Then it hit me, well, how am I going to get the opposite? And as soon as opposite came out of my mouth, I went, the opposite. You spin the jig 180 degrees, and now the molding is face down, bottom down. So I take the two things that physically can't change and manipulate those and not move the one thing that has all the air in it. Since I learned that day, every corner I've made since has been absolutely perfect. Remember, if there is no air, there is no air. So it's a perfectly opposing cut. What does that mean? That means you don't have any more time in coping, back cutting, or patch putting and caulking. And when you have a perfect miter, you have a gluable joint. When you back cut or cope, you don't have a gluable joint. So with expansion and contraction, as your house moves, it separates the crack and cracks the paint. So remember, any inside or outside corner, 3 simple steps at any angle. It doesn't matter how out of square your corners are. But it'll also allow you, with no charts, graphs, or calculators, to do any uphill or downhill vaulted or cathedral cut. For example, a downhill vault looks like this. This is a downhill vault. This is the downhill right. This is the downhill left. Pretty simple. The same 3 steps. 45 spring angle, 45 jig. Number 2, my ceiling drops at 30 degrees. If I divide 30 in half, my saw setting is 15. I want to make the downhill right. All I do is go to the opposite side. These are inside and outside corners. These are uphill and downhill vaults. Downhill right shows me put the tapered side of the saw, or tapered side of the jig toward the saw, put the molding face down, bottom up. Tapered side of the jig toward the saw, molding face down, bottom up. Drop it in like the picture shows, and make the cut. Once again, all the air happens when you move the saw. Don't move the saw. To make the opposite cut, spin the jig 180 degrees. Now the molding is face up, bottom down. Vaulted ceilings are the most complicated corners there are in trim work, period. Well, I just made a perfect downhill vault that needs no patch putty or caulking in about 20 seconds right in front of your eyes, and it's absolutely perfect. So remember, it's the easiest, fastest, and most accurate way to cut crown molding. Now, think of it this way. There's only 8 cuts in crown molding. You have to keep it simple. There's an inside left and right, and an outside left and right, an uphill left and right, and a downhill left and right. You just learned how to make all 8 cuts at any angle, which means you can do any cut, any corner, or any combination of corners with what you've already learned. For example, this is what we call a transition corner. What it's doing is going across the tall wall, turning the corner, and going downhill. You'll notice that there's a triangle piece. That triangle piece is called a transition piece, and it's very simple. Think of it as a triangle with an inside miter at half the degree of your inside corner. On the other side, it's a downhill vault at half the degree that your ceiling drops, and they meet or intersect at 0. And that's how you transition around a corner and downhill at the same time. So by knowing the 8 cuts at all the angles, you can make any cut or any corner or any combination of cuts you want. You can master crown molding just by learning the 3 simple steps with no training, charts, graphs, or calculators, no coping, caulking, patching, sanding, puttying, or back cutting. So it's the #1 system in the world for cutting crown molding.